and subscribe so that you can follow through the other domains when we review them. We are reviewing domain one, which is security principles. So what are the contents? What are you going to find in the exam, or what are you going to find when you are studying for your certified in cybersecurity examination under the domain one? So the first thing that is being talked about is the concept of information assurance, and the concept of information assurance basically is in three prong, or is described by what the concept we call the CIA triad, which are the primary components of information assurance. So the C in the CIA triad is confidentiality, which talks about protecting data that needs protection and preventing access to unauthorized individuals. The I is integrity, ensuring that data has not been altered in an authorized manner. If there is going to be any alteration, it has to be authorized. And the A, speaking to the availability, making sure data is accessible to authorized users whenever they need it and in the form and format that is required. So if someone is authorized to access certain information and the request for such information, the information should be available. Hackers always try to prevent access to information. Situations where you have incidences like DDoS, denial of services, or even ransomware, basically they are stopping you from having access to your information. The importance of privacy, authentication, non-repudiation, and authorization is another concept that you find under the domain one of security principles, under the concept of information assurance. So you need to understand what privacy is all about, that is keeping your information away from the public, authentication, that is validating your identity basically, and non-repudiation, ensuring that when data is altered or changed, the information or the person that the details or the stamp of whoever makes that changes is captured, and then you cannot deny it. And authorization is actually ensuring that you have the authority to carry out whatever task you want to carry out. This is a picture of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is a triangle that is called the CIA triad. So another topic that is treated under the domain one, which is security principles, is risk management. Risk management basically is talking about the process of identifying and evaluating controlling threats, including all the phases of risk context, risk assessment, risk treatment, and monitoring. So, and when you talk about risk is basically vulnerability found in an asset that can be exploited, by threats. When you apply risk management, to assess, and you are assessing and prioritizing the risk for an organization. So in risk management, basically you are assessing and then prioritizing this risk. So you have a concept of high probability, low impact, high probability, high impact, low probability, low impact, low probability, high impact. This is a matrix that you can use to categorize, risk within an organization. And there's a popular formula, for calculation, which is talking about the level of risk being equal to probability plus impact. This is a formula that you make use of in, prioritizing risk. Risk management has about four basic approach. You can accept risk, which is you can ignore the risk and continue your risk activities. This is when you feel that the risk is not worth to interfere with your operations. In a situation, for example, maybe you want to share an information. If you share the information, there is a risk of people picking on the information and using it against you. But when you consider that the risk of that is not worth enough for you to stop sharing information, you can go ahead and accept the risk and share. Also, in risk management, you can avoid risk, which means you can completely stop the risky activities and then remove the likelihood of occurrence. And in this case, you can decide not to share that information. Like in the example I made, you can decide not to share the information and avoid the risk completely. Mitigating risk is an action to prevent or reduce the impact of an event. So one of the things when you are mitigating a risk, in the case I mentioned, when you are sharing an information that is you perceive to be has some risk, you can mitigate risk by sharing it and giving an explanation, or sharing it on a platform whereby people can ask questions. Thereby, you are mitigating the impact of what could happen if people misconceive your information that you have shared. Another way is to transfer, which is passing risk to the third party. This is very common when you make use of insurance. A third party, which is the insurance company, bears the risk by, when you transfer the risk to them. So another topic under the domain one, which is the security principles, is security controls. So and when you are talking about security controls, you are looking at safeguards and countermeasures that protects the CIA, which is that protects your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the system and information within an organization. So we have three types of control. We have the physical, technical, and administrative. So under the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity, you look at physical controls, technical controls, and administrative controls. And then the implementation of security controls reduce risk to an acceptable level. So when you implement security control, you are expected that this will help you to reduce the amount of risk exposure that your information or your system is exposed to. So when we're talking about physical control is using physical devices or hardware devices such as maybe a badge reader or building a fence and putting barbed wires around the facilities, or or taking specific security actions, maybe using our security guards to block people or using some barriers. These are physical controls. Then we have technical controls or logical controls. This is when you make use of computer systems and networks to implement. So when you're talking about things like firewalls, you're talking about things like setting up a DMZ zone, configuring intrusion detection systems. These are technical controls that require some levels of technicalities. And then administrative or managerial controls. This uses directives, guidelines, and advisories or policies to that are aimed at the people within an organization. An example of administrative control is when you pass an information that certain places within an organization cannot be used for chatting or for use for doing official system, or maybe you're setting a principle like, okay, you cannot work on your system at certain hours of the day. These are administrative controls. So we have three controls: physical controls, technical or logical controls, and then we have the administrative control. Then we have another key topic that is treated in the domain one, which is the governance element. So, and inside governance elements, we are talking about things like governance, policies, procedures, standards, organization security, rules and governance, policies and procedures. They determine organizational management and they drive how decisions are being made. So we have regulations, we have standards, we have policies. So regulations give birth to standards. When you have a regulation, regulations are usually put in place by the government, and and then people create standards out of government regulations. So when there are standards by organizations like ISO, like when you have current Institute of Electrical Engineers, all those kind of organizations, they can set standards, and then standards are used to make policies within the organizations. So when policies are set, when an organization now derives its own policy from the standard that has been set, then procedures within the organization can now be set up for you to carry out certain action. For example, if you are going to carry out the vulnerability assessment, the procedures for carrying out a vulnerability assessment within an organization would depend on your company policies, and that policies must have been derived from standard, maybe standard like NIST framework, and then those standards are usually influenced by the regulations that government has put in place. So when you have regulations, these are laws and has penalties. Standards, they are put together by teams and they provide a framework and policies, policies and procedures to support regulations, and policies are within the organization and then the guide organization. Also procedures, these are step-by-step details for completing a task in line with organizational policy. So, and the last thing that you see under the security principles, which is the domain one of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity, is the ethics. So basically, it's a review of ISC2 Code of Ethics. And what this topic or what this section is basically talking about, members must commit to act legally and ethically within the field of cybersecurity. That is, as long as you're a certified, member, or ISC2 has certified you as a cybersecurity professional, you must commit to act legally and ethically within your practice. This is cyber culture interface. If you have gone through this video and it makes any sense or it has helped you in any way, please like the video and share with your friends. And also please subscribe so that we can grow this channel and put up more amazing content.
Looking at domain 2, which covers the incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery. If you remember in our last video, we talked about the fundamental concepts of the information assurance as being the CIA triad, and the CIA is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the focus of domain 2 is on the availability component of the CIA triad and the importance of maintaining availability for business operations. So this what makes up the domain 2, the incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery. So incident response talk about the mitigation of violations of security policies and recommended practices. Business continuity focuses on actions, processes, and tools for ensuring an organization can continue critical operations during a contingency. And disaster recovery are these activities necessary to restore IT and communication services to an organization during and after an outage, disruption, or disturbance of any kind to the organization. So this ensures that when all is done, you can recover from a disaster. So these things are the components or are the things that makes up the domain 2 of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam. So when we have the incident response plan, incident response plan responds to abnormal operating conditions to keep the operations going or to keep business operations going. So this talk about the plan that you have in place to ensure that when an incident happens or when something goes wrong, the business operation will continue. And this has four main components according to the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam. These are the preparation components, which are things you do before the incidents happen at all. Then we have detection and analysis, which are the things that you do during incidents. Things to talk about indicators of compromise. This is where you detect it and then you analyze incidents indicators. Then you have the containment, eradication, and recovery. So in containment is where you make sure that the incident does not spread beyond, and then eradicating and recovery. So this is a component of the incident response plan. And the final part of the incident response plan is a post-incident activity. So these are things you do after an incident. Things like, documenting, reporting, knowledge sharing, ensuring that the information or the experience that happened during the incident are shared and given to stakeholders who are concerned so that they can learn from it. These are things like lesson learned from an incident. So the second aspect is the business continuity plan. So the business continuity plan is designed to keep the organization operating even during a crisis. So when a crisis is going on, even before you finish eradicating or when you have not fully gotten a hold of it, it's so that business will not shut down. Maybe there's an infiltration in a bank and you don't have to shut down the banking operations because you have an infiltration. You should be able to continue working and attending to your clients. So this business continuity plan contains things like how and when to enact a plan, notifications, systems, and call trees for alerting when the plan has been enacted, contact numbers for contacting stakeholders involved. Then you have the immediate response procedures and checklists and guidance from management. So these are talking to the things you do for during an incident to ensure business is still ongoing. Then for disaster recovery plan, we are talking about what is activated when incident response and business continuity fails. Disaster recovery plan is activated to ensure business comes back to normal as quickly as possible. And it has the following components within the plan. You have an executive summary providing a high-level overview of the plan. We have departmental specific plans. We have technical guides for IT personnel responsible for implementing and maintaining critical backup of systems. Then we have full copies of the plan for critical disaster recovery team members and checklists for certain individuals. Now, under this domain 2, it's critical to understand some terminologies under incident response. So in incident response, we have a few terminologies that you need to be familiar with before writing the exam. So one of them is breach. So here I'm going to list out some of them. The first one I'm mentioning here is breach. So what do you talk about when you have a breach? When you have a breach is when there's a loss of control, a compromise, an unauthorized disclosure or an unauthorized acquisition or any of such a similar occurrence. So basically loss of control, and then there's a compromise within your system or your network. It's a breach. Then we have events. So an event is any observable occurrence within your network or within your system. Like we can say within your organization also. Then an exploit. So when a particular attack, you know, exploits the vulnerabilities within your system, we call that attack an exploit. So that's what happens when vulnerabilities are taken advantage of. Then we have an incident. Incident is an event that actually or potentially jeopardizes the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of an information system or the information the system is processing, storing, or transmitting. So when anything happens to all this data, we say an incident as it's called. We also have intrusion. So intrusion is a security event or a combination of events that constitutes a threat, a security incident with which an intruder gains or attempts to gain or access a system or a system itself without authorization. So when you have an intrusion, you say when any of these things happens, you say you have an intrusion, meaning that there's been an exploit or meaning that unauthorized attacks or somebody attempts to gain unauthorized access. So when you notice any of these things within your system, there's an intrusion. Then we have a threat. So a threat is a potential for an agent, a threat agent, maybe a software or an application to exploit a vulnerability within your system. So what is a vulnerability? Vulnerability is a weakness in an information system or the system security procedures or internal controls or implementation that could be exploited or triggered by a threat source. So when you have something within your system that can be taken advantage, or exploited from a source within or external to the organization, we call it vulnerability. And then lastly, we have 0 day. So 0 day is talking about something that you don't know before, previously unknown vulnerability with the potential of exploiting without the risk of detection. Why it's called a 0 day is because it doesn't have reference. So most of the time, these are vulnerabilities that a manufacturer or a creator of a system or an application does not know or has not yet found out within its system, or something that maybe they found that they don't know how to fix it yet. There is no solution to it. So they may not be able to spot it when it happens. This might be something that does not follow any recognized pattern or signature or methods before. So we call this 0 day. 0 day. And when it happens, it's referred to as a 0 day attack. So there are three possible models for an incident response team according to domain 2 of the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. So we have the leverage model, and then we have the dedicated model, and also the hybrid model. So these three models are what the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam talks about. So the leverage model is when you don't have specific people within your organization who are committed or given a task or responsibility of ensuring that an incident response plan is implemented. So in this case, when an incident happens, people are drafted from within the organizations to constitute like a task force that will implement the incident response plan. They are only put together when an incident occurred, and after an incident maybe is dealt with, they all go back to their respective assignment, and they are not expected to they may not be called upon the next time when an incident occurs. But when you have a dedicated model have people who have been selected or predetermined, who are always responsible for implementing an incident response plan. So whenever an incident occurs, these are the people that are committed with that assignment of making sure the plan is implemented successfully. Then we have a hybrid model. In an hybrid model, it is a combination of both the leverage and the dedicated model. So it's a mix of the two. Maybe one or two people are dedicated, and the others that join the two are not dedicated. So finally, objectives of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity Domain 2. So these are the things you are expected to know, after going through the Domain 2 of the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. I mean, these are the things that you're expected to know or to see or to be able to respond to inside the exam or during the examination when you're taking the certification exam. So the first objective of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity Domain is to understand how organizations respond to, recover from, and continue to operate during unplanned disruptions. Another one is to recall the terms and components of incident response. Another objective is to be able to summarize the components of a business continuity plan. Another objective of this Domain 2 is for you to be able to identify the components of disaster recovery. And lastly, you are expected to be, to practice the terminology of and review business continuity, disaster recovery, and incident response concepts. So these are the objectives of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. Please like, share, and subscribe so that this channel can grow and can be able to produce more content.
We continue the certification review of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. And in this video, we are looking at Domain 3, which is the access control concepts. The focus of this domain, which is access control concepts, answers three basic questions. And these are who, why, and how. So in this domain, we are looking at who gets access and what do they access. So when you are talking about access control, you are determining who is the person that is trying to access something and what kind of access do they have. The second question is why access is necessary. Why does this subject or this person need the access? And then the third question is how to manage the granted access. So when you are studying ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam and you are taking Domain 3, these three questions should be at the back of your mind in everything. We are talking about who is accessing what and why are they accessing it and how is this access being managed. So there are three key elements of access control: the subject, the object, and the rules. So the object or the subject talks about the first question, which is who. So when you're talking about who is accessing some resources within your network or resources within your organization, this is the subject. Who is the person in question trying to have or gain access into something? Then the object, what is this person trying to access? This is another key question or key element of access control that is taken up, described in this domain. What objects? Is the person trying to access video? Is the person trying to access documents? Is the person trying to access a database? What object? What is the person trying to access? Then the third element is the rules. How and when? How should everybody within the organization access a particular database and when? For instance, an administrator, the IT administrator of an organization will have a different access or different method for accessing a database compared to if the front desk officer wants to access the company's database. When and how will also be determined. Another example is maybe a staff or an IT support staff may have an access even outside the normal working hours to certain resources within the organization because of the rule. Maybe as an IT support staff, there are other things that the person will be able to do outside closing hours, but the front desk officer will not be able to access. So these are the rules. These are the things that guides our access. So these three key elements are very important for you to note in ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity Domain 3. The subject, which is the who, the object, the what, and the rules, which is how and when. And then always note trustworthiness and the need for access also determines how access is controlled. That is, for an entity that is trying to access something, what is the level of trust that the person has? And then the need for the information the person is trying to access or the subject in question is trying to access will all determine how access is being controlled within the organization. Then there are several concepts discussed in Domain 3 that you need to take note. The first concept I would like to mention here is defense in depth. So We are talking about information strategies that integrates people and technology, and then the operations capabilities to establish different barriers across multiple layers and missions of the organization. So when you are talking about this defense in depth, we are talking about the strategy that combines the technology, the people, and the operations. And then how do you set barriers across different layers and the missions this organization is trying to achieve? You need to understand this concept and have it at the back of your mind when you are studying. So this concept applies to multiple, it applies multiple countermeasures in a layered fashion in order to fulfill security objectives of the organization. It should also be implemented to prevent or deter cyber attack, but it cannot guarantee that an attack will not occur. So when you have a defense in-depth strategy in place, it also is just for the purpose of prevention and it's not guaranteeing that an attack will not occur. So it's often said that there's no way to stop the cyber attack from happening. All you can do is to limit the impact or to prevent, but eventually an attack may happen or always happen. But you need to have things in place like what we looked at in domain 1 and domain 2, how to mitigate the risk when it happens. So another thing about defense in depth is how it applies to the types of physical, logical, and technical and administrative controls or administrative access controls that you have in place. So you need to understand how defense in depth applies to the different type of access control, physical, the technical, and the administrative control. Another concept you need to understand is the principle of least privilege. So in domain 3, users should only have minimum access necessary to accomplish their job. So this is what principles of least privilege is talking about. That is, if you're a front desk officer, you don't need the right to access the financial database of the organization. So you need only the privilege to do the things that are specific to your roles. That is this principle of least privilege, and its importance. The importance of this principle should be understood as a part of domain 3. So if you are studying for your exam, you need to understand the importance of the principle of least privilege. So another concept you need to understand is privileged access management and how it relates to risk and the CIA triad. If you remember in domain 1, we talk about the CIA triad, which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you need to know how privileged access management, how it relates to risk and this CIA. So some of the things you need to understand under this concept is privilege and access management reduces risk by allowing admin privileges to be used only when needed. So if you're a cybersecurity professional and you are granting access or privileges to users, you need to set rules in place so that it is only when this privilege is needed that you grant access. For example, because someone is an accountant or the accounting officer of an organization does not mean the person should just have access to your financial database 24/7. The reason for use or the need should arise before the person can access such a database. So this is how this is the concept. This is what this point is explaining under this concept. Another thing you understand is privileged access management provides confidentiality by limiting the need for administrative access that is used during routine business. So what you're saying here is that the access that an admin will even have during a business routine or during routine operations within your business. So there's a confidentiality, that this privileged access management provides, by limiting the need for you to access, certain administrative privileges during business operations, especially operations that are kind of routine operations. So this helps to monitor access or to control access. Another point under this concept that you need to understand is privileged access management ensures integrity by allowing authorized administrative access during approved activities. So admin access can be granted or can be controlled in such a way that is only when an activity that has been approved is being conducted that someone will have admin access. So these are all part of understanding how privileged access management relates to risk and the CIA triad. So another concept we need to take note of is the privileged access. Okay, or another point under privileged access management, how it relates to CIA triad and the risk is that the privileged access management confirms availability by providing access only when needed. So this idea of having access unlimitedly does not work here. So it means it's only when you need the access that your access is granted. And once you are done with whatever task you are conducting, the access is withdrawn from you. So the next time you need to carry out such operations, you request for access again. So these are different ways of ensuring that access is controlled to resources. Another concept you need to understand is the difference between a regular user account and a privileged user account. Another concept you need to understand is segregation of duties. So, which means that duties in an organization should be segregated. Someone should be handling the front desk, someone should be handling finances, someone should be handling things that have to do with maybe relating with customers in a different way. So duties should be segregated so that the access that each individual can have within an organization to resources will depend on the duties they are carrying out. And also the difference between regular user and a privileged account user should also be understood. A regular user account will not have the same access to resources that a privileged account user will have. So these are things you should note in this concept. Another thing to understand is two-person integrity. That is, two-person integrity is talking about having more than one person to verify, activities or operations or access that someone is trying to get to resources. So another concept that you need to understand is how users are being provisioned from being hired to being terminated. So there's a process that every user within an organization is taking through, or how their access is being managed from the process or from the point of being hired to being terminated. So some of these things you need to understand. For a new employee, for instance, an account is created for a new employee. And when you're talking about onboarding, in the onboarding process, you are creating an account, which is like a baseline account for a new employee. This is something that everybody within an organization goes through. So onboarding process is a process that every new recruit within an organization goes through. So at this point, there's an account or there's a certain levels of access that people at this stage will have. Then you also need to understand that when positions are changed, accounts are being modified. So at this level, when the account is being modified, their access control needs to be understood that for such a person that is changing position, maybe from a manager to a senior manager or a general manager, their accounts will be modified and then certain privileges will have to be attached during the modification process. So another concept here or explanation at this point is temporary leave of absence means accounts should be disabled. So when somebody is going on leave and the person will not be within the organization's premises for a period of time, accounts should be disabled. This is able to control access from outside the monitoring. Because if someone is on leave, probably the IT may not be able to monitor every activity the person uses. So in such a case, an account like that can be disabled, such as a means of controlling access to organizations' resources. So for someone that is separated from an employment, still under how users are provisioned, separation of employment. Once someone is leaving an employee, the employment or is no longer an employee of an organization, such account should be deleted. Such account should not be left, hanging. These are means of controlling. Then someone when you are having what we call off body, then in such a case, almost like separation of employment or someone is no longer within the employment of an organization, the account should be deleted, disabled or disabled. Of course, it has to be disabled first. Then
deleted, especially for when an employee is being terminated. So another concept you need to understand here in domain 3 is the physical and logical access controls and how they are combined to strengthen the overall security of an organization. So you need to have a grip of what physical controls are, what logical control are, and this logical control, logical access or physical access, how they are controlled, or how the combination of both logical and physical, are being made use of in strengthening the security of an organization. So, examples of physical controls can be things like security guards, where you have security guard, fences, motion detectors. We have locked doors, sealed windows, lights, cable protection, laptops, badges, swipe cards, and guard dogs, cameras, man traps. All these are examples of physical controls and alarms. So man traps is or turnstiles are the kind of doors that allows only one person to pass through at a time. Or so these are all physical controls. Then logical or technical controls, examples are configuration settings, when you set the configuration of a system or a device, for instance, not to allow certain operations to carry out. These are technical controls. Or parameters stored on device. These are hardware settings, when you set the settings of an hardware to perform certain functions. These are all logical and technical controls. So there are three types of logical access controls that is talked about in domain 3. The first one is DAC, then we have the MAC, and then we have the RBAC. So the DAC is basically what we call discretionary access control, and this is implemented by the owner of the resource. So and enforced also at the subject level over objects in an information system. Basically, what we are saying, this when we talk about discretionary access control, we are saying the control or the access or the level of access that the user has is determined by the creator or the owner of the resource. For instance, if you're in your system, you created a file and you want it's at your own discretion to determine who you want to access your file. So you can set controls on a file or a database that you create and decide that, okay, I want only the principal managers in an organization or my senior managers in an organization to have access to this file. I don't want people below certain ranks within an organization to have access. Or you can say, okay, this file is open to the public, anybody can. So it's at the discretion of the owner of that resource. That is discretionary access control. Then we have the mandatory access control. So this is uniformly enforced across all subjects and objects within the boundary of an information system. So mandatory access control are usually things that are determined by the organization that bounds everybody within the organization. For instance, an organization might say that you cannot get access to the server or the server room of an organization. So this is mandatory for everybody. So if you have a swipe card or you have an access card, the access card will be limited not to be able to access that server room, for instance. So it's a mandatory access. For instance, another example is like everybody in an organization might be mandated that they can no longer access resources within the organization once closing time is reached. So this is the kind of control that is mandatory. So it is binding on everybody within the organization. Then we have what we call the role-based access control. And just like it sounds, the name, it's implemented based on the user's role, the role the user is performing within the organization. For instance, an accountant will have a different control on their access compared to a field engineer. The field engineer, the kind of controls or the limitations the field engineer will have will also be different from what the driver within an organization will have. So depending on your role, the access control can be determined by what we call the role-based access control. And then within the domain, which is access control, domain 3 of ISC2 Certified Cybersecurity, the objectives
That is what every learner, what everyone that has, if you are going through this domain, if you are studying for the exam, you are expected to be able to select access controls that are appropriate in a given scenario. So these are objectives. The first objective of domain 3 is that every learner should be able to select access controls that are appropriate in a given scenario. Then you should be able to relate access control concept and processes to given scenarios. You should be able to compare various physical access controls, and you should be able to describe logical access control. And also, you should be able to practice the terminology of access control and review concepts of access control. So these are basic objectives that everybody that is attempting the exam should be able to understand after going through this domain 3. Then finally, we have the terminologies, different terminologies that you should be familiar with under this domain. The first terminology here is crime prevention through environmental design. This is CPTED, and it's basically talking about architectural approach to design of buildings and spaces, such as features within your building can help to control criminal activity or attacks within the building. For instance, systems can be the building can be designed in such a way that systems are positioned, or devices that are being used by users are positioned in such a way that a working client cannot see what the person behind the computer is doing. So these are features within the building. So these are crime prevention through environmental design. This is a terminology you should be familiar with. Then we have defense in depth. We have mentioned it earlier on, information security strategy, integrating people, technology, and operations capability to establish variable barriers across multiple layers and missions of organization. Then we have discretionary access control. I've explained this in detail. This is when a certain amount of control is left to the discretion of the object's owner. Then we have encrypt. Encrypt is a terminology that's talking about protecting private information by putting it into a form that can only be read by people who have permission to do so. Other terminologies include insider threat. This is an entity with authorized access that has the potential to harm an information system through destruction, disclosure, or modification of data. So insider threat is talking about somebody within the organization. Of course, the person has an access and the person has the potential of exposing or revealing data. Layered defense is the use of multiple controls arranged in series to provide several consecutive controls to protect an asset. It's also a term that's similar to defense in depth. So what we're talking about here is, for instance, if you want to access an organization, you first of all swipe your card at the entrance. Then after a few meters, maybe you have to do a biometric scan. Then at some point, you need to enter some PIN or login code. So these are layered defense. Then logical access control system is an automated system that controls individuals' ability to access one or more computer system resources. Maybe a workstation, maybe an handheld device, maybe an application or database, but when you're talking about logical access control, these are things that requires verifications of individuals' identity or validation of an individual's identity. You may need to put a PIN, a biometric, and this logical is usually achieved by putting in some configurations or things that are a bit technical. Then we have mandatory access control. This is control that requires the system itself to manage access in accordance with organization security policies. So these are mandatory access. I explained this earlier in the video too. Then we have physical access controls. These are implemented through tangible mechanisms like wall, fences, guard, logs, etc. These are things that physical and you can handle. And then physical access control can also be combined with logical access. So it may require you providing something physical and also something logical. Then we have the principle of least privilege. Is a term that refers to principles that users and programs should have only the minimum privileges necessary to complete the attack. That is, if you don't need access to a database, then you don't need to be granted that access. You should be granted access to things that you need only for your business.
Then we have a privileged account, which is an information system account with approved authorizations of a privileged user. Then role-based access controls, an access control system that sets up user permission based on their roles. Then we have terminologies like segregation of duties, which means ensuring organizational process cannot be completed by one single person. That means you have different people carrying out different functions within the organization. Then we have the term subject, which is referring to an individual or a process or a device that is causing information to flow among objects or making a system change. Then we have technical controls. Then we have the security control. These technical controls are security controls, safeguarding or countermeasures for an information system that primarily is implemented and executed by the information system through mechanisms contained in the hardware, software, or firmware. So these are things talking about configuration settings, parameters, or hardware settings. Then we have what we call user provisioning. So user provisioning is basically the process of creating, maintaining, and deactivating user identities on a system. So these are terminologies you should be familiar with if you are going to sit for the exam. And please like it, share, and subscribe to this channel.
We continue the review of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam. And we are looking at domain 4, which is network security in today's video. So domain 4, network security, has two focus. The first aspect is focusing on computer networking, and it's also focusing on securing the network. So when you are studying for ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity, these two concepts or these two ideas are one of the things that you should have at the back of your mind, that you are trying to understand how computer networking works and how to secure this networking, this computer network. So we have different types of network. This is one of the things that you need to understand in cybersecurity in domain 4 of the network security. So we have 4 major types. We have several types of network, but the 4 ones I want to highlight for you in this review is LAN, which is the local area network, the wide area network, which is 1, or the WLAN, which is wireless local area network, and the VPN, the virtual private network. There are several other networks, but these 4, I believe, is what you will likely be coming in contact with in your practice, as a cybersecurity engineer, and also even in studying. These are the most common ones that you'll be getting reference to often. There are other types of network, which is like enterprise private network, personal area network, campus area network, and so many other ones. But those ones are rarely mentioned, or you rarely come into contact with them even while in practice. Another thing you need to take note of on this domain 4 as network devices. Network devices switches, routers, firewalls, servers, and endpoints. So these network devices are basically things that you also have to come across a lot while studying and even in practice as a cybersecurity engineer. And then switches basically are used for sending data or traffic to the right device within your network, within your local network. Routers help you to determine the routes through which your data will be sent, and how to identify other networks within the internet. Then firewalls helps to protect, and servers is where informations or data are stored for reference, where other devices send requests to get their information. Now, endpoints. The endpoints are basically end user devices. So when you hear endpoints, you're talking about things like desktop computer, laptops, tablets, mobile phones, voice over internet protocol, VoIP devices like your phones that are connecting using the internet for intercom in the office. So these are endpoints. There are so many endpoints, devices, but endpoints are end user devices. And when you are studying, have this advice from my mind: whenever endpoint is mentioned, know that they're talking about end user devices. Now, in ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity Domain 4, there are some network terms that you need to take note of. there are terms like protocols, ports, Ethernet, Wi-Fi, packets, IP address, MAC address. You regularly come in contact with this information or with these ports or these terms, and then you need to understand them. You need to look at the definitions and know how to apply them. For instance, protocols are a set of rules. Ports, you need to understand ports. Just like in a layman term, a port in real life is where maybe ships or vessel or aircrafts are being accessed. This is the point of entry into a city. So also in computing, ports are point of entry of data or traffic into your devices, and then there are protocols that guides how data and traffics are entered into. So if you want to understand more, you can check some other videos I've made that explain protocols and ports. So we have terms like Ethernet, terms like Wi-Fi, like packets, IP address. These terms are all defined later in this video. You can skip to the end of this video to watch the definitions of some of these terms. Now, there are several concepts within the domain 4 of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity exam or this particular course. So one of the concepts you need to understand, and is a fundamental concept, is the OSI and TCP/IP networking model. So OSI is Open System Interconnect, and TCP/IP is Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol networking model. So this is talking about how computers communicate with each other. These models helps to break down the system of communication between devices within the network. Now, looking at OSI model has 7 layers, while the TCP/IP model has 4 layers. But they both communicate, with the physical and network interface layer, where they take ones and zeros from the physical, devices like a cable. And then when data is moving within this network, within this layer, data moves as what we call packets. Packet is also defined later towards the end of this video. Then we have headers and footers being added and removed accordingly as this data move from one layer to another within this networking model. So when data or traffic is passing from one layer to the other, headers and footers are added to each of these packets to help identify and to also help each layer to interpret and also process the data that is being sent from one layer to the other. Headers and footers are very important while communicating with within the networking model. Now let's look at the TCP/IP model, which has 4 layers. So this is a model that was created by the IETF, Institute of Electrical Technology Foundation. You can check the full meaning also to get familiar with it right now. This specifies they specify 4 layers of functionality within the TCP/IP model. So it means that the TCP/IP model basically runs on 4 layers as against OSI model that runs on 7 layers. So, and these 4 layers are made up of the link layer, which is the physical communication. This is where we're talking about cables communicating and interface cards. Then we have the internet layer, which is network to network. It is more logical in the sense that they are talking about identifying different networks within the internet. You can have one wide area network communicating to another. This is the internet layer. Then we have the transport layer. This is layer where connections and connectionless exchange of data between different hosts happen. And when we are talking about UDP and TCP communication, this is where it's been explained within the transport layer. So you need to understand the transport layer very well too. Then we have the application layer, and this is where protocols and user application programs make use of network services, and this is mostly the part where end users interact with, where we are interacting. When you are browsing, for instance, your browser is an application and they function at the application layer, and most of the graphical user interface software that we use function at the application layer because it helps to interpret data to what end users can understand. So, and there are also so many protocols within this layer, and applications make use of this protocol in order to be able to use the network
devices well. And another concept you need to take note of is IPv4 and IPv6. So Internet Protocol version 4 and Internet Protocol version 6. So Internet Protocol version 4 was the original, Internet Protocol that was started for addressing devices. We all know there are several thousands or millions of devices that are connected to the internet, and each of them needs to have an address. So the IP version 4 is a way of addressing each of these devices on the network. But over time, standards organizations that are responsible for setting internet standards realize that Internet Protocol version 4 will not be able to provide enough addresses and also maybe enough security for the kind of devices that were coming out into the internet now. Nowadays, we have IoTs, we have a lot more devices, and then there's a need for more addressing to happen. So that's when Internet Protocol version 6 is now brought into play. So Internet Protocol version 6 provides more improved security. They also provide improved quality of service, and then they're able to support more devices. Another concept you need to understand also in domain 4 of which is network security of ISC2 Certified Cybersecurity is securing Wi-Fi. So the concept of securing Wi-Fi with protocols or like WPA2, we have PSK, and so many other protocols. You need to understand how this works. Not necessarily understand in details, but you need to get familiar with this concept of securing Wi-Fi signals. Now, another concept you need to understand in this domain is attacks on a network. So there are different kinds of attacks that happen on the network, and you need to get familiar with them. So we have DOS, DDoS attack. This is denial of service attacks. We have fragment attacks, which where data is being fragmented into pieces that you cannot make use of. We have attacks like oversized packets attacks. We have spoofing attacks. We have man-in-the-middle attacks. We have code injection or SQL injection attack. We have cross-site scripting or XSS attack, the privilege escalation attack, and then we have insider threats. These are all explained also later in this video under the terminologies. A good example I want to talk about here is insider threat. Insider threat is when somebody within your organization is posting a threat, to your network. Maybe the person is trying to compromise your network from inside. The person has access, so it is an insider threat. And we have man-in-the-middle attack, which is an attack that someone intercepting signal and then pretending to be two different people to people on two ends of the network. So all these attacks are things you need to get familiar with, or a concept that you need to understand for ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. So another concept is threats on the network. So here we have threats that are not yet an attack, or these are potential, things that can pose a risk, or that poses a risk causing an harm on your network. So they are threats. They may currently not be attacking your network, or they may currently not be harming your devices or your network, but they are threats when they reside within your network. So a very good example of them is virus. A virus can be in your system for months, and then you may not notice because you are not seeing the attack. So, but it is a threat. It can suddenly become something that is attacking your system. So we have worms, we have trojans, we have man in the middle, unpacked man in the middle, we have side channel, we have phishing attack, phishing threats, we have rootkits, we have hardware and spyware and malware. Remember, these are threats, but they are also carrying the potential of becoming an attack at any point in time. So when you have this within your network, that means there's been an intrusion and you need to take care of it as soon as possible. So another concept you need to take note of is how to identify threats. So in identifying threats, we have what we call the intrusion detection systems. Intrusion detection system could be network-based intrusion detection system, or it could be host-based intrusion detection system. So if you have a network-based, it means the intrusion detection is scanning your network to identify intrusions and also
For host based, that means it's scanning your host, which is your device. And remember, in the last slide, in the last point we were making, we were talking about threats. So intrusion detection system helps to identify threats, that are already an intrusion or that are existing within your network. So when you have an intrusion, it means the threat is already within your network. You are trying to detect it now. And then we have the CM2, which is Security Incident and Event Management. This is a tool that is very common, that is set up on your network to monitor the network and monitor devices too. These are tools you need to take note of in identifying threats within your network. Another concept you need to take note similar to this is how to prevent threats. So in preventing threats, you make use of tools like antivirus, which scans your system. You make use of tools like firewalls, which protect your network, also protect your devices. And then the IPS and NIPS, which is basically intrusion prevention system. And this is a network, could be network intrusion prevention system or host-based intrusion, just like we have in the intrusion detection. Intrusion prevention is actually stopping the threat from coming into your network, while intrusion detection stops, it identifies what is in your network. Prevention prevents it from coming. So antivirus scans work well because at the point of entry where the virus or the threat is trying to come in, the antivirus picks it up and then disallows it from coming. The same thing with firewall. Firewall contain rules that doesn't even allow such traffic containing threat to come into your system. And then we have the intrusion prevention system. These are systems that you can set up to ensure that you prevent threats from coming in. So these concepts are very common or very important for you to understand in domain 4 of ISC2 cybersecurity examination. Another concept you need to take note of are concept of ports and protocols. So ports and protocols, we are talking about networks and services. So ports, like we explained earlier, ports are like the point of entry of traffic or data into your device or into your network, or you basically use it for device. And protocols are services. These are like rules that are guiding the way services or your system works, operates, on the service in which your system control the data and control the flow of traffic. These are protocols. They are rules that guide this thing. So when we have in ports, we have two major kind of ports. We have physical ports and logical ports. So physical ports are the hardware ports, like LAN ports for wires and cables. So when you look at your switches, you see openings behind your switch where you plug in the cables. These are physical ports. So these are LAN ports. Then another on the other hand, logical ports are not visible. They are not physical. You cannot see them. They are things that determines services. These are ports on which services running. For example, you open your web browser. Your web browser is running HTTPS traffic in and out of your system. These are going in and out of the system through certain logical ports. So we have ports like port 80, port 443, port 21, port 22. All these ports are for different services like maybe file transfer, your SSH going and out of your system. So ports are basically points of entry and exit of traffic and data into your systems, and you need to take good notes and understanding of these two. Another concept you need to be conscious of is on-premises data centers and their requirements. So these days we have data centers because of cloud. The issue of cloud makes data centers more prominent these days. So, and when you're talking about cybersecurity, these are places that are prone to attack. So certain things you need to take note of while running your data centers or while talking about cybersecurity of data centers. The power that runs your data center, then high voltage or AC. These are things that ensure that your data centers are running up, they are up and running. And cybersecurity attacks can be conducted on these things. So you need to take note of this. Fire suppressions are also things you need to take note of. Redundancy, memorandum of understanding, and memorandum of association. These are issues or concepts that you need to get familiar with in ISC cybersecurity domain, which we are all talking about network security. The another very important concept is the importance of managed service provider and SLA. SLA is service level agreement. MSP is managed service provider, and these things are very important concept. You need to understand the relationship between an MSP and your client or your organization, and also how to uphold or to stay by the dictates of a service level agreement that you have with your client or your organization is signing with a provider, a service provider. So these are concepts that are very germane to ISC2 certified in cybersecurity. Then we have a concept of cloud and its characteristics. So cloud is trending these days. Almost everything is in the cloud. So, and it's important that you understand cloud as a cybersecurity professional. So there are cloud service models. So different cloud service models include SAS, IaaS, PaaS. So SAS is software as a service, IaaS is infrastructure as a service, and then we have platform as a service. So later in this video, we explain this in the terminologies, what each of these models means, but these are concepts you need to understand and look out for while studying. We also have cloud deployment models. So cloud deployment models, these are the ways in which cloud systems can be set up for the client's use or for your organization use. So we can have a public cloud. A public cloud is a cloud is set up for public access. Clouds that people like Google and Microsoft, they have public clouds for people to use. Then we have private cloud. Private clouds are usually owned by the organization that is set up its own cloud. Then we have community clouds. These are clouds deployment models that are set up for a targeted group of people, maybe a group of practitioners, or maybe a particular kind of discipline, maybe military, a community of military, a community of gamers. These are cloud that are related to community. So this is a deployment model. And then we have an hybrid. An hybrid is basically a mix of both, maybe public and private and community. Or when you mix these different models together, you form an hybrid. So these are key and fundamental concepts you need to understand. Another thing you need to understand under cybersecurity, ISC2 Cybersecurity, certified in cybersecurity for network security, which is domain 4, is common ports and protocols. So you need to get familiar with the common ports and protocols that we have. Here is a list of them, but these are the common ones. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 common ports here. We have the insecure and the secure alternative. So when we say the insecure, it's basically a version that is older, that has been found to have certain loopholes. Then we have a more secure version of it, which is the alternative secure port. So when you look at the insecure ports, we have port 21, which is the FTP port, the file transfer protocol. This is a service that run on this port. Like I explained earlier, ports, there are points of entry, and these are logical ports. Please take note of that. These are logical ports. So when you say port 21, you're talking about ports for FTP service, port 23 for Telnet, port 25 for simple mail transfer protocol known as SMTP, port 37 for time protocols, port 53 for DNS, domain name services, port 80 for hypertext transfer protocol, and then we have the other ones, IMAP, SNMP, SMB, and LDAP. So we have the secured alternative. The secured alternative for port 21 is port 22, which is secure file transfer protocol, and port 22 is also used for secure shell, which is an alternative to Telnet, because these services they run similar functions. So that is why it seems as a duplicated service running on same port. So it depends on the configuration on your system. So you need to conduct a check when you have access to your system to see what ports are running on your system, so for you to be able to identify. Then we have port 587 as a secured alternative for SMTP port 25. Then port 123 as secured alternative for time protocol of which is on port 37. Port 853, which is domain name service over TLS, which is a secured version of port 53. Then we have port 443, which is the HTTPS secured alternative to port 80, and like that 993.161 for SNMP, 2049 for network file system, 636 for LDAPS, lightweight directory access protocol. So these are common protocols, the associated ports. Now we look at the terminologies. So we are looking at the first one, application programming interface. These terminologies are things you need to understand and know, because while you're doing the exam, it can come up as a question. It can come up, as a way of description, and if you don't understand them, you'll not be able to understand the question. So API is basically a set of routines and standards or protocols, tools for building software applications to access web-based software application or web tool. So API is basically like an interface, for you to connect to applications that are running on the internet. So when you say an interface, this interface is being made active or made possible through the protocols and standards have been set in place. So this API, for you need to understand what the API is when you see it in a question. Then broadcast is transmission, is a one-to-many kind of transmission whereby one device is sending traffic to several other devices. This is, you are broadcasting. To the concept you need to understand. Then we have the community cloud, which is a system in which cloud infrastructure is provisioned for an exclusive use by a set of consumers. Like I explained, it could be for security, it could be for a particular mission, it could be for policy, maybe a government body. So a community cloud is set up for exclusive use by a specific community. Then we have denial of service. Denial of service is a kind of attack that is preventing authorized access. This is, you have an authority, you are legally authorized to access a particular information, but denial of service will prevent you. For instance, you are trying to log into Google, for instance, and you cannot check your email because maybe if a DDoS attack has been launched against Google, then you'll be trying to access your email that you have authority to access, but you can't access. So denial of service is deny you the use of a service. So this is an attack, it's a very common attack. Then we have encapsulation. So encapsulation comes into place when you are talking about OSI and network transmission control protocol, TCP models. When you are talking about layers, networking, and traffic or data moving from one layer of the OSI model to the other, or one layer of the TCP model to the other. So encapsulation is enforcing of data and hiding coding during a phase of software deployment or operational use. So in cybersecurity, I'm making reference to OSI model because it is common then when you are transmitting data from one layer to the other, you encapsulate the data, you are encoding the data in such a way that it can be transmitted safely, or it can also be transmitted efficiently. So you are hiding the code, you are hiding the data inside into a format that can easily be understood by the layer that is receiving it or by the device that is trying to process it. So encapsulation is used when transmitting data. And then we have other terminologies like encryption, which is the process of converting a message from its plain text to a cipher text that is not easily understood. File transfer protocol is a protocol or program that is used to transfer files between hosts. So there's a service, is a kind of service that runs on devices or run on network, and then remember it goes through a port 21 in the devices. Then we have fragment attack. In a fragment attack, an attacker fragment traffic in such a way that you are not able to make use of the data packet. It's just like breaking something that's supposed to be together into pieces. Then we have infrastructure as a service, which I mentioned earlier. Infrastructure as a service, this is where the provider, a cloud provider or a provider of a service, is providing core computing, storage, and network. You're basically providing what's supposed to be an hardware as a service. So you don't need to buy your own hardware. All you need is to connect to an IaaS service provider. For instance, if you need some kind of servers and you don't have the money to purchase the server, or you just need the server for a brief number of time, you can set up your applications on someone that provides the infrastructure. So your application is running on an infrastructure that is not your own, a computing infrastructure. It could be a storage infrastructure or a network hardware. So infrastructure as a service is when you offer this hardware. Then we have platform as a service. Platform as a service is when web authoring or application development environment allows applications to be built in the cloud before they are deployed. So this is a platform on which you build an application. So this PaaS service is a service that is offered to people who need the platform for developing their applications without owning that platform. So You just pay for this platform use, and then after use, your contract or your agreement with them ceases. So platform as a service is a concept that you need to understand very well as you study. Then we have software as a service. This is when a cloud customer, uses cloud applications running within a cloud infrastructure. For instance, you can log into a cloud infrastructure and be using their accounting software. So you use it because you don't necessarily need to own the software. Maybe you need to just run some accounting project, then you subscribe for it, pay, and after using the software, you get your information, you get all the data or whatever you need, and then the contract ends. So some people offer these services. It's called software as a service. So this is a concept you need to understand. You can read the definition properly. Then we have hybrid cloud. Like I mentioned, is a combination of public storage and private storage, where some critical data will reside on the public and then some resides on the private. This is common with organizations who want to do like a backup. Sometimes they have a copy of their cloud within the organization completely under their control, and then they have some other data on cloud, on the public cloud, for easy access for others. So mixture of private and public is what is making up a hybrid cloud. Then we have a public cloud, which is a cloud infrastructure that is provisioned for open use by the general public. A private cloud is opposite, which is used for cloud computing platform that is implemented within a corporate firewall. It's exclusive to the organization that owns it. Then other terminologies you need to take note of is Internet Protocol version 4 is a standard protocol for transmitting data from source to destinations in a packet switch communication network. We are talking about the rules. Internet protocol is what you use to transmit data on the internet, basically. So when communicating on the internet, the internet protocol comes into play, and that is why we have internet protocol addresses. Then we have man in the middle. Man in the middle is an attack where an adversary positions himself in between the user and the system. So you are using your system from your end user. As an end user, you are trying to access a server. Meanwhile, there's someone in between you and the server. So we send the message to the server, someone intercepts the message and replies to you, and you think the message is coming from the server. So this is a man in the middle, man standing in between, user and the system. Then we have oversized packet attack. So this is a situation where an attacker has purposely sent a network packet that is larger than what is expected or what has been provisioned for within a network. So basically it will choke the network. That's what it's going to do. So the packet is too large, and then it disrupts the flow of traffic, and then this can lead to so many other complications like denial of service, because when the packet, when the traffic is jammed by oversized packets, then system receiving the information will not be able to process it. Then your devices too will not understand the packet because it has been inflated beyond the normal size. So it causes a failure. Packet is a representation of data or network layer of the open system interconnection model. So packet is what you use when you are talking about data flowing at the network layer. This is where you are talking about routing of information. So packet is what will describe the kind of data. Please, you need to also study your OSI layer very well and have an understanding of this concept. Other terminologies include spoofing. This is faking or sending address of a transmission to gain a legal entry. You are pretending to be someone so that you can gain access into a system that is secure. A payload is the primary action of a malicious code attack. So a payload can be configured to do different things. So the primary action is of the malicious code is what we call a payload. Then we have the payment card industry data security standard. This is a standard that applies to merchants and services who provides credit or debit card transactions. So if you're into a fintech and or you're working for a fintech and you provide payment services, this standard is very peculiar to such industries, and then you need to abide by these standards. These are, as a cybersecurity professional, you need to understand it. So this is a common standard too that may come up in questions or you're expected to understand or know in domain 4 of certified in cybersecurity. Then we have oversized packet attack. I mentioned this, sending a packet that is larger than expected. Then we have protocols. Protocols are basically set of rules, or formats and procedures to implement and control communication between systems. So when the device is communicating with another device, there are protocols that makes the two devices to be able to understand each other, because each of them will abide by the same protocol, which means they abide by the same rules. It makes it possible for two devices to understand the traffic or the messages they are sending to each other. Other terminologies include a VLAN, virtual local area network. It's a logical group of workstations. They may necessarily not be in the same physical or geographical area, but they are logically grouped together. They could be network devices or hosts that appear to be on the same LAN. So they appear to be on the same LAN, but they may not be on the same geographical LAN. A device could be in Africa, another device could be in Europe, and then they will be on the same VLAN. Then we have the VPN, is a virtual private network. So this is a network that is built on other network, and they provide secure communications, for transmission or transmitting between two networks. It's basically like a tunnel for secure communication. So when you enter into a VPN, you are basically securing, having direct communication with a particular server, without interference. So it provides secure communication. Then we have the WLAN, which is a wireless local area network. It's a group of computers and devices that are located in the same vicinity. They form a network based on radio transmission rather than wired connection. Basically, a wireless LAN is a LAN that is made up of Wi-Fi connection or radio connections, not using cable. Once it's not using cable, it's wireless. So a LAN that is wireless. Then we have the concept or the terminology called zero trust. Zero trust is when you remove the belief or design belief that the network has any trusted space, or ensuring security is managed at each possible level, representing the most granular access. So zero trust is basically saying that when someone or a device is working on the network, every time the device is trying to access an information, it will have to go through check. The network assumes that the device is not trusted, basically. So you don't treat requests from a user or a device based on trust, like, okay, this device is already existing in my network, therefore you grant the device access. No. Zero trust is saying no trust. Every device on your network is potential threat, or is an attacker, and is potentially compromised. So every one of them needs to go through check or security at every level, making sure nothing is compromised. So basically that is what zero trust is talking about. And then we have micro segmentation. So this is building on the zero trust strategy, meaning that it breaks a LAN, a local area network, into small, highly localized zones using firewall. That means, for instance, if you have a network that has like 100 users, then you can break those users into like 10, 10, 10, which gives you another 10 micro network within a larger network. So when you segment your network in that way, it means that if somebody is moving from one segment of 10 users to another segment, you will have to go through checks, which means that each segment does not have zero trust for each other. Basically, that is what micro segmentation is doing. It helps to achieve the zero trust strategy. So these are the domain objectives in ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity Domain 4, Network Security Domain. Learners should be able to do certain things. These are the objectives. So every learner of this domain should be able to explain network security concept. You should be able to recognize common networking terms and models. You should be able to identify common protocols and ports and their secure counterparts. You should be able to identify types of network threats and attacks. You should be able to discuss common tools used to identify and prevent threats. You should also be able to identify common data center terminology. You should be able to recognize common cloud service terminology. And then you should be able to identify secure network design terminologies. And also you should be able to practice the terminology of and review network security concepts. So these are the like the about 10 basic objectives of network security. So as you prepare for your certification exam, ensure that you are able to achieve these things. Ensure these objectives are met. Please like, share, and subscribe. Today we continue into our last domain of the certified in cybersecurity exam by ISC2. So we are looking at domain 5, which is the last of the 5 domains, and it's the domain on security operations. It's one of the very technical domains too, so you need to pay attention in studying. The focus of this domain 5 is basically the day-to-day moment by moment use of security controls and risk mitigation strategies within an organization. So this is looking at security controls and how you implement risk mitigation strategies within your organization. Now, the key concept about this domain is basically on how to secure data and the systems they reside in. So when you are looking at security control is all about securing the data and the systems that the data stay inside them. So now we go back to our concepts. So we have several concepts within this domain 5 you need to take on cognizance of as you prepare for your exam or as you get yourself trained on knowledge as you study the ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity. Now, the first concept I'm referring to here will be data information security. Data security or information security. So, information security as a concept is basically talking about a process and discipline that provides a structure for protecting the value of data in an organization. So it's a process. Data security is not just the one, it's a one step, it's not a singular approach. It's a process and a discipline, and the essence of this discipline or this process is protecting the value of data within the organization. Now, another key concept that follows that is how to handle data. So if we are talking about data security, you also need to talk about how is data being handled. Now, so we have about 7 major process or steps in the process of handling data. So the first thing is that you create data. Data are created, data can be stored, data are shared, data can be used, data can be modified. You can archive data and you can also destroy data. So these are the 7 ways in which data is being handled. And when you're talking about information security or data security, you need to consider how data is being handled in order for you to properly secure the data. Now, another concept you need to talk about or take note of is data handling policy. So the last step we talk about data handling process. Now we're talking about policies or like procedures, guiding how or defining how data is being handled within an organization. So we have classification, you have categorization, labeling, we have storing, encrypting, you back up and you destroy. Destroying is coming up again. So these are policies that organizations put in place. So the first one is classifying of data. So this is assigning sensitivity level to each data that an organization is creating or generating. Another thing is categorizing. So you can determine the type of data. This is putting data in different category. So another thing that data handling policy does is labels data. At least it applies a particular name to data. Then data handling policy also stores and retains data. So it determines, when I mean store and retains, it means the policy guides how long do you keep a data. When you have a data, how long do you keep a data in your database or you keep a record of your data? Then we have a policy about encryption on why you need to encrypt. Policy stipulates that a particular type of encryption should be done or encryption should be done in a particular way. Then we have policies around backups too, policies that states that backups should be done maybe weekly, monthly, daily. So these are policies, statements that guides backups. Then we have policies around destroying. So we have some organizations that have a policy that maybe after when data is being used or after a particular time, data is being erased permanently or destroyed. So these are policies, or procedures about data handling. Or organization uses these 6 steps or 7 steps to or 7 guidelines, so to say, in handling data. And these things form what we call the policy, data handling policy. So another key concept, is data sensitivity level. If you remember in the last slide, I just mentioned that one of the things that data policy stipulate is the sensitivity, of a data, which is how you classify data. So we have different sensitivity levels. ISC2 domain 5 is where they talk about different sensitivity levels. So the first sensitivity level here is a highly restricted. So these are data that if it's compromised, it could lead to substantial loss or injury or property or damage. It can even lead to litigation claims against the organization. So organization classify such data as highly restricted or highly sensitive data. So we also have moderately restricted. So this data could lead to loss or temporary, loss of temporary competitive advantage or loss of money, revenue, or disruption of certain activities. So this data will definitely not lead to loss of life or may not lead to litigation, but they can also lead to loss of some kind of losses. So this can be considered as moderately restricted. So according to domain 5 of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity, we have a category called moderately restricted. So another sensitivity level we have here, according to the domain, is low sensitivity. So these are data that could cause minor disruptions, or maybe at best, maybe they could cause a delay in the organizational process. Then we have the unrestricted data. Some data are classified as unrestricted or public data. So these data are for public use or public consumption. This data is already out there, so it can harm no one or cause any further uh, dissemination or disclosure. If a dissemination or disclosure of such information happen, it will not cause any further harm. So these are like four data sensitivity levels that are specified in domain 5 of ISC2 cybersecurity, certified in cybersecurity. So there are four data sensitivity levels according to domain 5 of the ISC2 certified in cybersecurity. And those are the highly sensitive, moderately sensitive, low sensitivity, and the unrestricted public data. Now, another concept you need to take note is logging. So the concept of logging is talking about documenting what is going on, like creating a log, for what is going on in your system. So every network or device usually have that feature in which they log activities. When someone logs into the system, the username, the date, the time, the things that are being carried out, activities that is going on within the system or the network are always being logged. So under domain 5, we talk the concept of logging. So there are ingress monitoring tools. So ingress is basically talking about traffic that is flowing inwards, that is coming in. So ingress monitoring tools, when they talk about logging, are tools that monitor, things or traffic or events that are coming inwards into the network or the device. So we have firewalls, we have gateways, we have remote authentication servers, we have IDS, IPS. IDS is intrusion detection system, and IPS intrusion prevention systems tools. We have the SIEM tool, the security information and event management tools. Like we mentioned, we explained these tools in the last video under domain 4, and we also have anti-malware solutions. So these things help to checkmate inflow of traffic into the network or into your device. So this is categorized under logging. So when you are looking at domain 5, check login. These are concepts you need to take note of. Another concept here is login, which is egress monitoring data type. So when we talk about egress, these are outgoing. So we are monitoring, it's talking about the kind of data. Logging here is making mention of the kind of data, the data types that you mentioned their outflow. So when these data are being sent out of your device or network, they are also specially monitored. So when you are sending an email is often monitored, or checked, is logged in your system. So when you are, okay, the explanation here is that all these data types are being logged. Everything that is going on or going out through these data types or in form of these data types, they are being logged in your system. So and you can always check into your system to where the log how to check the log file and see information about this thing. So when you are copying something into a portable media, into a flash drive or a CD-ROM, it's going to be logged. A file transfer protocol. So when FTP services is being used, it's going to be logged. When you are posting something to web pages or websites, the network will log it. And then what is going out through the application programming interface, the API to, they are always logged. So this is a concept you need to take note when you are talking about securing data within your system under domain 5. Another concept you need to take note of is data encryption. So, and then we have best practices for data, for securing data. So data encryption here is a best practice. It is always good when you are sending data or traffic is going out of your system to always encrypt it, so that when data is in transit, it cannot be intercepted and understood. When it is intercepted, but most likely it might be intercepted, but when it is intercepted, because data is encrypted, it is not readable. It just becomes useless to whoever intercepted the data. So the process of encrypting data in plain text with a key and algorithm to create a ciphertext, is what is data encryption all about. So we are talking about converting a plain text into a ciphertext using what? A key and an algorithm. So when you are encrypting a data, that means for the data to be understood, it has to be decrypted. That is the process of removing the encryption. So this process involves a key and an algorithm. So this is what is used to encrypt. And also, when you are decrypting, you also need a key and an algorithm. So if the key you are using to encrypt, if the key and algorithm you use to encrypt the data is the same key and algorithm you use to decrypt, then it's called a symmetric encryption. Then if the keys that you are using to encrypt is different from the key that is being used to decrypt it, so after converting it from plain text to ciphertext, if you require a different key and an algorithm to understand the ciphertext to convert it back to a plain text, if you use a different key, it is called asymmetric encryption. So you need to take note. This is very confusing, so you need to go over it a few times for you to be able to understand the concept very well. Another key concept you need to take note of is hashing. So hashing here is taking an input or a set of data, arbitrary data, mixing, encoding it or combining it with a text or a data, and then getting a fixed length result of a hash value. So what we are saying here is that if you have a data, for instance, in a document, and then you want to hash it, so if you add another set of code or algorithm and apply it to this data, you have a result that is called a hash value. Now, the difference between encryption and hashing is the fact that when you hash a particular data, it comes out permanent. Or another thing you need to take note about hashing is that if you have 5 different documents and you apply a particular hashing techniques to those 5 documents, even though those 5 documents are different, you will always get a fixed length of hash value. So the hash value that will come out is going to be fixed. For example, if the hash value is 128 bits, so regardless of the kind of document, whether it's a picture, whether it's a Word document, whether it's a video, regardless the kind of data you are hashing, the result you always get will always be 128 bits. So that is what hashing does. And then the thing about hashing is that when you hash a document or you hash a data like that, you cannot reverse it. It's irreversible. So that's the benefit of hashing. Unlike encryption, when you encrypt, you can always decrypt it back as long as you have the algorithm or the key. So another concept you need to take note here is function of cryptographic hash. So like I said, cryptographic hashing is very useful and it's easy to compute the hash value for any given message. All you need to do is to apply whatever technology you are using to hash to it, and then you can get an hash value. And hashing also is non-reversible, unlike encryption and decryption process is non-reversible, like I just explained. Then the content integrity assurance. So when you have an hashed data, when you hash the data and you have an hash value, it is infeasible to modify such that you now reverse the hash and come back. So this is always very useful, because when you hash a data and you share it, or you are sending and someone gets hold of it, no, even though they know the technology you use to hash it, you cannot reverse the hashing process. So it is infeasible. So it helps to maintain the integrity of data when you hash it. Another function or of cryptographic hash is the uniqueness. So it is invisible to find two or more different sensible messages that hash to the same value. Now, remember, don't mix it up. The other time I mentioned that you always have a fixed length, which that is, if you have 5 or 6 different data and you hash it, you always get, if you hash it with a particular technology, maybe MD5 or SAH256, or let me say SAH128. If you hash it with that particular technique, the length of hash value you get will be the same thing for 5 different data, but the hash value will not be the same thing. The hash length will be the same thing, but the hash value will not be the same thing. So you need to take note of this. They are always unique. So if you hash 5 different data, the hash value that you get for each of them will be different. And then deterministic too, which means that the same input will always generate the same hash. That means if, for instance, I sent a document in Word, a Microsoft Word document now to someone, and I tell the person that I use an MD5 hashing technique to hash it, and then I send the hash value to him. So if the person has a copy of the same Microsoft Word, and then he hashes his own document with the same MD5, he's going to get the same hash value that I got, despite the fact that we are working in different locations or using different devices. If we are hashing the same document from 2 different sources, but using the same hashing technique, we always get the same hash value. So it helps to check the integrity. So if, for instance, if I send a document to you 10 years ago, and I also send you and I hash it now, or if I send a document to you, no matter when I send the document, and I hash the document and I tell you, okay, this document I'm sending to you, this is the hash value. You can keep the hash value safe somewhere. So if you keep the document in your system for a number of days or for a number of time, and you want to reference the document, and you want to be sure that the document has not changed from the one I sent to you, you can now apply the MD5 to the document you have, hash it. If you still get the same hash value as the hash value I sent to you initially, it shows that the document is intact. But if you get a different hash value using the same hash technique, that I sent to you, then you know that something has happened to the document you have. It has either been corrupted or someone has interfered with it. So this helps to maintain the integrity of documents. So it's the same hash technique is always applied on the same document, always give the same hash value. So another concept you need to take note of is concept of configuration management. So configuration management is a process and discipline that is used to ensure that the only changes made to a system are those that have been authorized and validated. So because configuration is basically talking about configuration management, is simply talking about the fact that before any changes happen to a configuration, it has to be authorized and validated. So there's a configuration management system that authorizes every changes proposed. So as a front desk engineer, for instance, and I'm working on a particular file and I want to make a change to it, I cannot just arbitrarily make a change to it. I have to make a request to the configuration management in place, and then my request will be authorized and validated before it can be applied to the document. So for configuration management helps to make sure that abrupt changes are not just made to data and documents or information within an organization. Then we have the configuration management process. So the configuration management process usually made up of the following, which is identification. You have to baseline it. You have change control and verification and audit. Identification, you need to identify the data or identify whoever is trying to make the change. Then you have to baseline the changes that is being requested to certain policy or certain standards. Then change control is to monitor how the changes are being implemented, and then verification and audit. So when data configuration change has been made, has to be verified, and then audit process needs to take place for it to be sure that the right configuration changes are being made. Now we also have configuration management elements. So these are the things that we find while doing configuration. So we have inventory, baseline, you have updates and patches. All these are always seen or make up configuration. And you need to understand what an inventory is, what baselines are, what are updates, and what are patches. Another key concept to take note in Domain 5 of the Certified in Cybersecurity is the concept of best practice security policies. So these are policies that help to implement best practices within the organization. And these practices involve some sets of activities. So some of the things involved under best practice are data handling, password, acceptable use. So these are policies that guides data handling, policies guiding password creation or use of password, basically talking about appropriate use of password, appropriate use of data, acceptable use, also talks about appropriate use of assets, devices, and data. So policies around these elements or around these topics are security are policies that can are policies there are security policies that are set up in place to help implement best practices within this area. The policy of bring your own device is the best practice security policies, and this is talking to the appropriate use of personal devices, because many users within the organization today prefer to make use of their own personal devices within the organization. So these policies help to set an appropriate use or standard for users to make use of their devices within the organization environment. Another common practice security policy is privacy. So security policies around privacy help to implement appropriate protection of individuals' privacy. This talks to the things you can do or the you how you handle other people's data and even your own data within the organization. Another common practice or security policy that implements best practice is change management. So in terms of how transition is made from one state to another state within the organization, regardless of which aspect of the organization, changes are implemented in a particular way. So security policies that implement best practice specifies how changes are implemented within the organization. So we go to examples of password policy. So password policy is an example of a best practice policy. So each of these password policies or each of these best security policies can cater to different aspects of password. For example, we have password creation. So a security policy that is implementing best practice in terms of password creation will have the following policies under it. So one of the policies could be like all users and admin password must be able, must be at least of a certain length. So if you are creating a password within an organization, there is a policy that say that your password must be up to maybe 12 characters, must contain alphanumeric, it must be this, must be that. So these are policies are guiding password creation. Another example of such policies, password cannot be the same or similar with password that you are using on any other website or system. Password should not be single word or a commonly used phrase. Password that are easy to get should be avoided, such as names and birthdays of your friends or family, or private or your favorite band. These are things that you can avoid. Password policies guides against use of such. Then we talk about dictionary words and phrases should be avoided. Policy could specify that default installation password must be changed immediately after installation. This is a very common mistake many people make within organization. They buy a new device or they buy a new system and they retain the password that the manufacturers put into the devices. So policies can be set to guide such errors from occurring. Another example of password policy implementing best practice is password aging, and the is in the area of password aging. These password policies could include things like user password must be changed on a schedule that is established by the organization. Some organization will tell you every 4 weeks or every month. Some organization may say it's like every 2 months. So each organization will specify, you will create a policy around how you change your aging password. Another password policy here is that password that you've used previously may not be reused. Then system level password must also be changed according to a schedule established by the organization. These are examples of policies catering to password aging. Another policy area in password is password protection. So, an examples of policies taking care of such is passwords must not be shared with anyone. Passwords must not be revealed or sent electronically, and do not write down your password. So ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity in Domain 5 takes time to explain or detail, understanding of password policies. Other policies that could be considered acceptable use policy procedures. So these are policies that talks about how to handle data access, system access, how disclosure of data is being handled, password again, data retention, how long do you keep data within your system, internet usage, how do you make use of internet, what kind of sites you should browse and which kind of site you should not browse, then company device usage. So these are acceptable use policies. Bring your own device policies, like I mentioned earlier, could specify the kind of cell phone. You could talk to your tablet, laptop, smartwatch, Bluetooth devices. All these ones are personal devices that if you are bringing into the organization, there should be policy to guide how you make use of such devices. And then we also have a privacy policy protection. And privacy policy protection, these are policies that speaks to things like personal identifiable information. So it's such information like your name, like your phone numbers, some personal information such should be protected. So these policies guides how such data are being handled. Also, EPHI, which is electronic protected health information. These are information that needs to be taken care of. Bank cards information. All these are private information that policies within the organizations take care of such information or such data on how it's being made use of, made available within the organization. Then we have examples of laws and regulations that are enforcing privacy. Examples are GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation, General Data Privacy Regulation, which is common in Europe. We have PIPEDA, which is Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents. These are policies or laws and regulations ensuring that privacies of individuals within an organization, or even people outside the organization, or uh, data about anyone relating to you or organization, how they are being protected. So another key concept we need to take note of is change management. So in domain 5 of ISC2 Certified in Cybersecurity, we also talk about change management. So this concept of change management is saying that there must be a request for every change that is happening within the organization. And then this request goes through various stages of development and test before it is released to end user. That means within an organization, a user or an individual cannot just decide that I want to change the web interface, or I want to change the IP address of your server. Why do you want to do that? There must be a request, there must be a need, there must be something that is requesting for the change. And then when this request for change comes up, it must be passed through series of development and tests. So within the cyber certified in cybersecurity, or when you are talking about security operations, which is domain 5, you need to understand how change management occurs or how change management are being implemented. So we have change management practices. So activities that happen within these change management practices include things like documentation, documenting every change, getting approval for the changes, and then rolling back. So if the changes that have been approved are not performing or fulfilling the expectation, there should be a rollback. Another concept here is change management policy. So when you're talking about change management policy, the activities that these policies can take into consideration or take effect on things like deciding to change. So there should be a policy that sees change management policies speak to these activities or guide and ensures that these activities are performed to standard. So as a cybersecurity professional, understanding security operations, which is domain 5 for certified in cybersecurity, you need to understand this concept very, very well. Another key concept or understanding you need to take note of is security awareness training and how it introduces internal threats to organizations. So, under this domain 5, you also need to understand the importance of security awareness training and how organizations can make sure that this security awareness training are conducted because of the impact it will have on the threats to the organization. So users within an organization needs to be aware of the kind of practices, of the kind of attacks, the kind of common, common things that are happening, or the common trends with when you talk about cybersecurity attack. These are things or companies that come together and put together into a training. So as a cybersecurity professional, you need to understand the importance of security awareness training and how it can reduce threats. Another thing, concept here is the levels of security awareness. So domain 5 of security operation talks about three levels of security awareness. You have the educational level. This is where you actually get educated, on the kind of security situations that can happen, or security breaches that can happen. This is a proper education. Then we also have another level of awareness, which is training. This one can be specific. So training happens based on topics or organization. For example, if you are working within the financial sector, you can be trained on cybersecurity incidences that are related to finance. And if you are working within telecoms, you can be trained on cybersecurity issues that are related to telecom. So training can also be based on positions or individuals, or based on topics. Then the other last level of security awareness is awareness. This is just a general understanding of what security or cybersecurity is about, or is a kind of security consciousness that is applicable to everybody, regardless of your position, regardless of your level of education, regardless of which organization you find yourself in. No, another concept that is very important for cybersecurity professional according to domain 5 is social engineering techniques. So if you are studying for your certified in cybersecurity, you need to understand different techniques, different social engineering techniques that are happening or that are out there. So examples here are baiting technique, phone phishing, or phishing technique. Then we have pretexting. So we have quid pro quo, we have the tailgating, we have false flag or false front operation. So baiting, you need to understand how baiting works, how cyber hackers use a bait to lure their targets into being hacked. Phone phishing, when just phishing taking place on phone, or phishing usually refers to maybe video, when you are presented something that is not real. Maybe you are sent a website or an image or something that has a link behind it that will take you to a different destination other than what you have. Then we have pretexting, quid pro quo, tailgating, false flag. Tailgating is a very common physical, when someone is trying to uh, follow you into accessing a physical barrier just by using your own presence. So you need to understand these social engineering techniques that people make use of within the cybersecurity field. As a so security operations and domain 5 of the certified in cybersecurity takes care of all these several concepts. So you need to go over these concepts over and over. Remember the previous video I shared some concepts in part 1, and this is part 2. And also, so if you have read or if you have reviewed security operations, which is domain 5 of certified in cybersecurity, you should be able to do the following things. You should be able to explain concept of security operation. You should be able to discuss data handling and best practices. You should be able to identify concepts of logging and monitoring. You should be able to summarize the different types of encryption and their common uses. You should be able to describe the concepts of configuration management. You should also be able to explain the application of common security policies. You should be able to discuss the importance of security awareness training, and you should be able to practice the terminology and review the concepts of network operations. So, as a certified in cybersecurity professional, you are preparing to be or take the exam. These objectives are the things you should be able to do after going through the domain 5 of the ISC2 curriculum. Welcome to Cyber Culture Interface. Today we are looking at ISC2